Ethiopia, Abyssinia, Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, the land of origins. I decided to take a trip to Ethiopia to get away from the United States, just to try to see what else is out there. In March of 2018, I decided to fly from Virginia to Addis Ababa to tour the magnificent rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, where I wanted to view the group of 11 monolithic and semi-monolithic structures which were carved directly into stone out of the mountainside at least 800 years ago. But the trip wasn't easy. First, it took around 13 and a half hours, direct non-stop, to travel from Dulles all the way to Addis Ababa. You may say, well, it's not that long, but imagine all the kids running up and down the aisles of the plane, with parents, not a care in the world, letting them run up and down the aisles on Ethiopian 501. It seemed to me as if the flight attendants were the parents of the kids, as they were the ones bringing them back to the parents. And then the parents would just sleep and just let them run off again. So I didn't get good sleep on that trip. But I can tell you that Ethiopian Airlines 501, it definitely fed me well. At least 3 full meals and a snack in between each meal. So I can give it to the airline that they did a good job accommodating the passengers. But I do have to give it to the airline for at least providing a English to Amarinya phonetic guide to help those who aren't accustomed to the language to learn a couple of phrases and greetings and depictions, numbers, and useful words to help those people interact with the locals so that they can enjoy their stay in Ethiopia without feeling too lost. And I can tell you for sure I did use this phrasebook to the maximum. At times people thought I was actually Ethiopian, and then once we got into the meat of the conversation, they would start speaking words that I didn't understand, and I'd say, whoa, 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 I'm sorry, I'm not Ethiopian, and they'll just look confused. So that was actually a pretty funny thing that happened a lot of times. So thank you, Ethiopian Airlines, for providing this list of words to use. Very helpful. Once I touched down in Addis Ababa, I had to change terminals to go from the main terminal, international, to the domestic side in order to board my flight to Lalibela. But this is where the drama began. Unbeknownst to me, after about an hour and a half into the next flight, the plane stopped. So I'm thinking, hey, we're national. It doesn't take that long to get to Lalibela. I looked at the map. It's only up towards the north. We get off. And so I get off as everyone else is getting off. And once I get into the terminal, I'm looking for my bags, and I'm like, okay, where are my checked luggage? Didn't see it. It's rolling around, rolling around, rolling around the carousel. No, none of my bags are there. So I asked the airport personnel, hey, I don't see my bags. They didn't really understand English. I'm sweating. I didn't understand Amarinya. I'm trying my best, talking about yet no shanta. I don't know what I'm saying. And they understand a little bit of what I'm saying, so they asked for my tickets. And so I give them my tickets, and they just kept saying Lalibela. And I'm like, yes, Lalibela, that's where I'm going. And they just kept repeating themselves, Lalibela. And I'm like, yes, where's my bags? And so they had to find some random person that spoke English. And then come to find out that the plane stopped in Mekelle Alula International Airport. And we were not in Lalibela. And so I got off the plane when I was not supposed to. I was supposed to remain on the plane until the plane lifted off again in about another hour after refueling. Unbeknownst to me, Ethiopian Airlines treated it like an Airbus, but I wasn't used to that. I've never taken a plane that was used as a bus to where you would, instead of going to its final destination, it would go to a midpoint, stop, have people get off, have some people's bags come off with them, then they put the bags back on the tarmac, and then the people that are supposed to stay on the flight goes back on the flight. I was confused. It was one of the most strenuous, stressful times I've ever had in my life. I didn't know what was going on. They were asking me questions like, okay, why did you get off the plane? You were just supposed to stay there and then get off afterwards and then come back on. So I'm like, how am I supposed to know this? I don't speak your language. So luckily there was a local young female and her mom that lived in Addis Ababa that were there on vacation, and they helped translate for me and helped me understand that I was definitely supposed to stay on the plane, and that if you're going to Lalibela, that should be your next destination, so you should get back on. And so they were going to Lalibela as well, so I actually met them a couple times while I was out there. But that was a very stressful time. So I know most of you may be laughing out there like, oh, you should know that. You should have looked at your ticket. How am I supposed to know? Like I said, I've never dealt with a Airbus before. I only dealt with direct flights. So that was an experience. But finally, here we are. I made it to Lalibela. Scenery was beautiful outside. I was surprised about Ethiopia's mountains. You know, you would see it on a map, but I never knew it had so many mountains. It actually looked like Mars, but it was beautiful. That's one of the things I love about Ethiopia so far in regards to the scenery. Betam Konjo. Everything was beautiful. After touching down in Lalibela and finding my bags, it was time to find my tour guide, who did a great job because he was right outside at the parking lot waiting for me. So there was no stress there. Once I got into the van cab, I sat up front to see the entire scenery. There were other people in the back who were also with me on this particular van taxi, but they were there for different dates when it came to their tours. So I had a certain amount of dates, they had a certain amount of dates, but they were coming with us. So I didn't really see those guys who were in the van with us. March through May is typically supposed to be a light rainy season in Ethiopia, but this portion in 2018 it was very dry. While we were on our hour-and-a-half long trek from the Lalibela airport to the central portion of Lalibela where the churches were located, we came upon multiple stone and clay and mud homes on the side of the streets. I found that to be very endearing, as it was similar to certain homes that I saw in Haiti when I went there back in 2013. I see that the people definitely use the land to the best of their ability. So that was a pretty nice thing to see. A lot of comparables to Haiti for those who are up north in Ethiopia. I know when most people notice that those in Addis Ababa don't live like that. Well, that's a big city, and Lalibela is definitely still coming up. So I did notice that there were many trucks, many new roads being made, and I asked the driver, and I was like, what is this? How are these roads coming into place next to these mud and straw homes? Who's doing all of this? Why is this construction being made in this desolate area? And my tour guide, who was in the back behind me, explained to me that the Chinese were actually coming in to make business, and I think it was either textiles or call centers. I'm not sure what it was, but they were there to make new infrastructure to allow their big trucks and machinery to make it up the mountains to create new things in the Lalibela area. I don't know exactly what it was, but I know from what he told me that new things were coming. So in time, Lalibela won't be the same the next time I go there if I do ever go back. So that was pretty interesting. But I can say that regardless if the Chinese were coming or not, it definitely put a lot of people to work in a sense that they would either be working on the land with just simple cattle and rocks and wood, which I did see a lot. A lot of women with wood on their back, just cattle all over the place. Little kids hitting the cows, hitting the goats, but then there were other kids out there moving rocks. Yes, it was labor intensive, but they were getting paid for that. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, but it's allowing the economy to push forward. I can tell you that for sure. But let's see what they have planned in that area. I'm not sure. We'll see. Another thing that I loved about Ethiopia was just the smile on these kids' face as you drove by their villages. In another comparison to Haiti, it was regardless of how poor they were smiling, waving their hands, happy to see you. They had a joy in their face that regardless of the situation, they were alive, and that was just such a blessing to see. Yes, they were in poverty. Yes, they didn't have much. Yes, schooling wasn't the best, but they were happy. And I didn't see any violence. I didn't see anything that you should be afraid of. Some people say, well, don't go out there. There's terrorists out there. You may get kidnapped. They don't know what they're talking about. They need to come out to Ethiopia on their own and see for themselves if it's any violence. There was no violence. Everyone had something to do. No one's just sitting around doing nothing. Everyone had to tend to their land, either go or come from school, whatever it was. They had things to do, and they were very happy doing it. So that was a blessing to see. So every kids we walked by, they weren't initially just begging or anything like that. They were really happy to see foreigners and wanting to see what these foreigners were about. Coming up on the left, there was a colorful Ethiopian tuk-tuk, or as they called it, a bajaj. So that was rather a inexpensive way to travel in the area of Lalibela. And there's other tuk-tuks around in Ethiopia as well, but it was definitely necessary because certain cars, the gas and the gasoline, you would constantly need to be filling it. But with like a tuk-tuk, it's like a motorbike almost, so it could really go far just on a couple liters of gasoline. So it was very necessary. Most of the people use donkeys to transport their woods and home essentials from different parts of the land. So it was interesting to see the dynamics of the mechinas, the machines, the cars, and then the bajages, and then donkeys and cows. It was a total difference from what I would see in Virginia. You wouldn't see things like that. So it was nice to see those type of things and how humble they were at the same time. So big ups to Ethiopia. As we got closer to Lalibela's city center, I noticed that there was more commerce. Actual people selling things on the road rather than just working the land. Many cool shades, most likely from China, wallets, chains. But I also did see a pretty good amount of coffee shops. And as you know, Ethiopia is famous for its origins of Arabica coffee. And let me tell you, their bunna, as they call their coffee, was real and it was spectacular. And as we got closer to my hotel, I noticed that there were a couple of mobile phone shops along the road. On this trip, I didn't bother purchasing a SIM card, as I felt that Wi-Fi would suffice. I didn't have anyone to call either way, and I really wanted to just get away from the world and away from it all and just see the scenery. So it was just more important to just indulge in what I was already immersed in this beautiful nature, and just take it all in. No phones needed. Finally, After almost a full days of travel, I finally made it to my hotel. Went ahead and booked a couple of days at the Panoramic View Hotel, which had a wonderful panoramic view. So it was the name suited the hotel perfectly fine. There was mountain scenery, birds, and for some reason I picked two beds, but it was fine. I didn't need two beds. All I needed was one. But outside was beautiful. You got to see the infrastructure of what was coming up ahead. New homes down below with tin roofs. Um, it was just beautiful. Wonderful scenery. I would go back just for that. Overall, the air was clear. I was able to breathe perfectly fine, even though I was in a mountainous region. But it did remind me another aspect of Haiti, that below all that beautiful city scenery was people living. So there wasn't really any garbage collection or anything like that. So you could smell the aspect of burning, people burning their wastes, burning wood, things like that. So at the nighttime, I had to close the window. So that was one negative that I did have, is because I had a hard time breathing with all the ash in the air and the smog that would come into my room from down below with people burning things at night. So that was the only bad thing about my trip there at the hotel. But you can't really avoid nature. That's just what people do when there isn't really any garbage collection or anything like that. Being that I was the only person on the tour with my particular tour guide, we were essentially just a one-on-one team. So we didn't have to wait for anyone. We could just go and do as we pleased on the times that we set. It was a lot easier that way. So that was a blessing. So after I got to my hotel, he allowed me about a good 30 minutes to just go ahead and place my bags down and wash up for a little bits from my travel. And then from there, we would immediately go out to our first church. The first church on the list that we at least passed, but not entered, was the Church of St. Mary. This one is said to be the first church that was built. And as you can see so far, it's been immaculately preserved, especially on the inside. It's actually one of the most popular among the pilgrims of Ethiopia and of other nations who do come to Ethiopia, because it's dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and the Virgin Mary is particularly worshipped by Ethiopians and others who see her as a saint. But as you can see, there's a tarp at the top, not a tarp, but an actual structure. It's there mainly because of erosion due to weathering, which is damaging the stone surfaces, essentially of all the churches. And being that it is one of the oldest places, not places, but community organizations like UNESCO definitely trying to preserve these and shelter these monuments from the rains and other erosion factors. So the Church of St. Mary isn't the only one that was covered. Many of them are covered. Next up, to the left of St. Mary, is the Church of Bete Medhan Alem. Medhane Alem. This is the largest church on the site. It's usually the first church that most people visit when they first come. It's surrounded by 37 colonnades, and some of them have been crumbled because of time. But the entire church, including the doors, the vaults, the pillars, the windows, is cut within one single rock. So it is made to resemble a building. I won't go through all of the 11 rock-hewn churches. Only the ones that I found interesting from what I initially saw. As you can see, there goes my tour guide to the left with the blue shirt on. And there's many other tourists that were there. It was a very, very hot day. But I was very happy to see the different sites and to see how they dug down deep into the rock to make these tunnels, to make these churches, to make windows out of pure stone and granite. It's amazing. My tour guide told me that the people who made it got their inspiration from the angels, and the angels helped them. So I listened, and I definitely tried to take in what he was saying. But it was a pretty interesting story to how these churches were built and how quick they were built. But if the angels help, hey, I do want to take the time out to give a big kudos to my tour guide. I do apologize, I don't remember his name, but he was very patient. Whenever I wanted to sit down and actually read the signs and read the different reasons why these churches were built, he sat there and he waited, even if we were going to go over time. But he wanted to ensure that I got the full experience of Ethiopia. So he spent extra time to tell me things that weren't even a part of the tour. But I really appreciate it and I learned a lot from him. So thank you, tour guide. Here, my tour guide mentioned that this pool was used for either baptismals or just times where, I don't know if it's Easter, Fasika, where they wanted to do some type of cleansing. So at this time, the pool portion wasn't really usable because of the algae and the um, grass that was grown. But I think he even mentioned that it's supposed to be in there. Oh, they put the grass on top of it so that it doesn't grow mold and algae, so they can take it off when they're ready to use it and then dunk people in it. I'm not sure if it's considered holy water or what, but it's a reason why there's grass over that square portion. And as you can see, there's many different people, women from Ethiopia. And I found out that most of these people from Ethiopia that are there, they're not even from Lalibela. They came from all different regions. They were tourists just like I was. They were doing their pilgrimage there for the first time, and they would go with their wonderful garb, habesha, libs, their clothes that they wear, and go there and worship. So it was interesting to see how many different people were there. Old people, young people, they were all there for pilgrimage. So it was pretty interesting to see that. Once inside of the rock-hewn churches, you'll always notice that there's certain curtains within the churches, and the curtains are there to separate where only the holiest of the holiest kas or priests could go, and the regular parishioners could not go beyond those curtains. One of the churches was said to hold a copy of a replica of the tabernacle, is what they stated, and they wouldn't let anyone behind the curtains. But other than that, they had wonderful colors, wonderful paintings. You could see that a lot of effort was put into making these churches. They put carpet down so people's feet wouldn't get hurt on the jagged rocks because they weren't really smooth. And when you went into the churches, you definitely had to take your shoes off because it was considered holy ground in a sense. So it was pretty interesting to see the architecture inside and how the natural light would come in from the outside. Here you can see a guard that's standing outside with a leaf in his hand. That's to swat away mosquitoes and different bugs that come and bother you. But there's a tarp over this particular hole, is because these are where there are certain priests or monks that came from either Israel or faraway lands who would come to do pilgrimage there, even Ethiopia, and they would just stay there and die. So because they died, they show respect for them by leaving their bodies there uncovered, not entombed or anything. And so the tarp is there just for a little bit of, I guess, not having to show a dead body out in the open. But other than that, it's pretty out in the open once you're past that tarp. Here I am just outside of one of the churches, taking a couple snapshots. I really take snapshots of myself, but there I go. I was having a very good time while there. Next portions, you'll see tunnels where you're able to walk on the ground from one church to another. But you definitely have to watch your step, because if you don't, you can fall down and you will die. So I was actually pretty scared to stand right there, because if I slipped, No one can help me. It's very, very far. It's, I think, over 200 feet down. Um, but that's some jagged rocks right there. So many different shots of this particular area. And then next up, you'll see another pool where I guess they would use for baptismals, but at this time it was full of algae, so they wouldn't do it at that particular time. We have some shoes. That's my shoes, the green shoes. I have to take off before I went in. So that's my feet. I wasn't scared that anyone would steal my shoes. It was pretty safe there. Wonderful architecture up above. That's original. I'm not sure if they touched it up. I think that's exactly how it was when they made it. But it is beautiful, regardless if they touched it up or not, because that's just original designs. See the Virgin Mary, baby Jesus, and wise men. Many different depictions, as you can see on the side. We have a Virgin Mary that looks essentially Ethiopian, but you never know how they looked in the past. So maybe they could just be black or just darker than what people depend them on. Who knows? Depict them on. But yeah, it's cool if they look like how the Ethiopians look today. Then perfect. So it is what it is. So we'll see when we die how Mary and Jesus looked. So I'm walking up into a cave from one portion of the church to another. Beta Georgis, the more popular rock-hewn church that you'll see in many different areas when you're wanting to research about Lalibela. And there goes the landscape beyond Beta Georgis. And we see some folks just hanging out with tourists, just having conversation. Got some good shots next to the more popular church that people are aware of. Yeah, very scary though. If you slip, you're done for. So you definitely have to watch your step. Many pilgrims go there, and I think some have died in the past from just falling into that area. So I didn't want to be one of them. So it was cool. So I have a shot from the outside. You see algae grows in the building. But that's a natural occurrence when it comes to limestone and different rocks. There's nothing you can really do about that. But it was beautiful nonetheless. Once we were done viewing the most popular rock-hewn church there in Lalibela, it was time to head back to the Panoramic View Hotel, where I was served buna, some coffee, from a wonderful waitress who was very attentive to my needs and had wonderful conversation with me. Her English was so-so, but she said she learned a little bit of English essentially from the different foreigners that will come. She calls them Ferengis, so she wanted to practice English with me, but she was pretty cool. She essentially kept me occupied, I guess. I was essentially the only one there eating by myself. So I definitely want to give her a shout out. Wubanchi is her name. So just thank you for helping me during those times where I would essentially not be speaking to anyone while it was dinner time. But she also served me some injera with tibs, just other different beef stew. And the injera is made with teff, popular staple there from Ethiopia. But it was good. So join me next time for part 2 of my Ethiopia trip. Definitely have more to talk about. So these were just the things that I loved about Ethiopia. Haitian traveling to Lalibela. Alright, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you later.